I mean, the owls are up at the top of the list, to be honest, in association to UFO or UAP. There has been some argument to say, are they really owls that we're seeing? Or is it the screen memory being placed in there to represent an owl when it isn't actually an owl you're actually looking at? Because we've had reports of strange looking deer with big black eyes, you know, or a giant bunny, believe it or not, sat in the middle of the road. It's true. You know, lots of different things. So can we really trust our eyes in some cases? There's that side of things. But the other side of things is that sometimes there's seemingly some type of conscious connection between these animals and the observers.
Welcome back. I'm here again with Steve Mera. Steve, welcome back.
Thank you, Sean, for having me back. It's been it's good. I've enjoyed it. It's been a while, you know, but we've managed to get. Been very busy filming, so it's been hard to sort of just fit in, but I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, even today, you're being a champ, and after a long day of like, oh, do it again, cut, do it again.
I know. It's very, very difficult to put time sort of slots in it. I try and do as much as I possibly can, but sometimes it's like so demanding. And you know what? Film crews always want them more out of you than you ever sort of plan. That's always been the case with doing filming, you know, just a bit more. Oh, I've got this idea. Can you just do this? You know, but before you know it, you've lost like an hour and a half, you know, out of your own time.
Can you say anything about what you were filming, or is it still?
I can't say regarding NDA,
okay, I'm not.
But no, I can't say at this moment because they got me on air. What I can say is October the 2nd, Unsolved Mysteries is out on Netflix, which is volume 5. And myself and Barry have an episode there. It's coming out on October the 2nd. We are allowed to say since yesterday, because we got the all clear that, okay, we can now say, because we had to wait for Unsolved Mysteries and Netflix to advertise it before we could even open our mouths and say anything, you see. So, but now we can say October the 2nd on Netflix. Yeah.
Well, here's good news, because this episode will air in mid-October, so it'll already be available. So perfect. It's already on Netflix right now. Not right now, but when this airs. So check it out. I'm actually looking forward to it.
Fantastic.
Okay. So I'm not going to go into all these owl and raven and hawk experiences that I've had, but one of the reasons I wanted to bring Steve back on is to talk about shamanic experiences, initiations, or, you know, just experiences that's similar to the ones that people who followed this channel for a while know about me, but I'm not going to rehash them because you've heard them 100 times. But we're going to kind of look at it from several different perspectives, starting with shamanism and then also potential communication with NHI. And Steve, before this we started recording, I talked about kind of one of the 5 things it could be, and I couldn't remember the 5th. That would have been precognition, right? You just happen to go outside and do those things when you remember ritual causally that something happened, right? So
yeah. Anyway. Fascinating. A lot of people do have precognitive. They always say that, you know, at least everybody will have some form of precognitive or premonitive event in their lives, at least one. You know, some have.
By the way, the last one that I had, I was using binaural beats either that day or within a 1 or 2 day period just to test. But
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've recently talked with a friend of mine who's a specialist in that area, Anthony Peake. And his work really heavily and scientifically looks into not only the near-death experiences, but out-of-body experiences, expanded consciousness, deja vu, and premonitions or precognition. You know, and there is a pattern he's seen that there is the capabilities of being able to see a future plan, but not tend to have much evidence of the changing of it.
When the United States and China clash, the world will never be the same, especially when forces beyond reality threaten to intervene. What if the United States went to war with the People's Republic of China? How would these rivals fight for supremacy on land, sea, air, and across the stochastic streams of time? What wonder weapons would be unleashed? What horrors would emerge from the irradiated sludge of the South China Sea? What heroes would rise and forever change the course of history? Tread into the deepest and darkest dimensions of the multiverse, gaze through a kaleidoscope of fractured realities, and bear witness to the disturbing visions of World War III from today's greatest minds in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Weird World War, China. Available now from Baen Books at baen.com.
Because we might argue the paradox theorem there, wouldn't we? We say, well, if you could change a precognitive event, you would not have had it in the first place because it didn't happen. Because you changed it, so we end up with this going around on this thing. Though that there are also a very, very few people that say, oh, well, I did change it, and we say, okay. But most of it, really, no. I mean, people do get some fantastic things, but it's always afterwards, and it happened with 9/11, it happens with plane crashes, and, oh, I saw that happen. Well, did you say anything to anybody? Yeah, I told my brother. But you couldn't stop the event from happening.
Right.
So, well, yeah, kind of, so maybe that is just we glimpse the future, or something allows us to glimpse the future, because phenomena, when you get into communications, especially NHI stuff, is that they're seemingly aware of future events. So if they're aware, are we gaining knowledge through them, through consciously somehow through them, or giving us little flashes? And they ask the question then, why do we have them? What's the meaning behind them if we can't change them? I don't know. That's always been the argument that people have asked. If we can't change them, well, why have them? But isn't that just the way the phenomena works? That trickster phenomena. It's like, oh, well, we're just going to show you this, but you won't really understand it, but we'll just let you show it,
Yeah, you keep hitting, prior to our conversation, you kept hitting on things inadvertently to what had happened. You just talked about the trickster. I'm going to tell you another dream.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll be quick because people don't want to hear me talk. They want to hear you talk. So I had a dream. I was in, a house kind of that was similar to a house I'd been in Pennsylvania somewhere a long time ago in high school. And there was someone I knew who was like lifting weights in the corner. And I just looked at him and there was just this knowing in the dream. And I'm like, you're not so-and-so. You're an imposter. And I could feel a little bit of a fear, because I have a sense, and I don't know this, but I have a sense that I'm like a cat, and anything that shows up in my dream is like a little mouse. And I don't know why I have that feeling, but whatever it was, I could sense some fear. And it was just kind of like, all right, you got me. And then it sits down and just like, well, let me show you how I do this. And it starts switching, like rapidly switching. I can see an Indian man. I can see, all sorts of different men just switching like its appearance. And I think in the dream, I'm like, can't you do any women? And then he instantly shifts to like this dumpy redhead that has like a butterfly tattoo on her like upper left breast. And I'm like, don't you do attractive women? It's like, okay, fine. And then the dream ended, but I was just like, what the hell was that?
I know. Yeah. I mean, we know scientifically, through sleep process, because a lot of people have these sort of through the sleep process, but the brain is definitely more active during sleep. And we still don't know, science-wise, we still haven't got a clue what's firing the neurons and what's it doing. I mean, all we're doing is trying to get 20 minutes of REM. We have to spend 8 hours a night mostly in hypnagogic or hypnopompic states, moving backwards and forwards. If you ever film yourself in bed, it's funny how much you're shifting around during the night. It's crazy. If you put it on fast speed, it's like you're just like a fly jumping around on the bed. But that's when we're not asleep. That's when we're trying. All we need is 20 minutes REM. That's all the body requires. Some people have trained their bodies to be able to enter into it very fast, so they don't need much sleep. But, we do know that there's so much happening in the brain whilst we're sleeping that maybe we are having those expanded consciousness moments, and they have meaning to them. I would always say, always keep a pen and pad by the side of your bed like I do, because surprisingly, there is so much meaning in subconscious information than there is in the conscious. Yeah, because the world's busy. We've got a lot to deal with in the conscious mind. Looking out for cars and, did I turn my radio off? Or, what am I doing tomorrow? What am I having for tea and dinner? And you know what I mean? So your brain's constantly. But at night, what's happening, because it's not just doing that, but it's like 10 times more. What is it doing? It's got to be processing something. So if it's subconscious information, it means our normal areas of where we're locked in our conscious life is expanded open, and we're open to other information. And that's where sometimes critical information comes in. So it's always good to write those things down. Expanded consciousness through sleep has been an argument that's been going on for many years.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
Okay. Shamanism. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail. Us into a completely different area, but you keep saying things that synchronistically remind me of things that have happened. So,
yeah, well, shamanism, there are very many different practices all over the world. The whole process of this was to thin the veil. That's what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
Thinning the veil is, in other words, thinning between our reality and somewhere else. And when you thin that veil, you not only can be expanded consciousness to gain information, but also to be able to communicate with intelligences. Different names for these intelligences, of course. Call them the gods, call them the deities, call them NHI, call them aliens, call them what you will. But intelligences, the controlling agencies, I would call them. So many different ways. Now it's been utilized through the practice of inhalation of certain smokes and drugs, those sort of things. That's been done through sort of Native American practices. Fasting has been utilized as well. But it's about taking you because your body's connected to your mind. So it's about taking you through the layers. It's like a layer of an onion, and you're trying to get to the core. And over a period of practice, you can do, and then you start to see the thinning of the veil. There are different ways. There's the ingestion of certain plants. We know about ayahuasca. There's also a very interesting cone, which goes back to symbolistic days of the Sumerians, which I won't get into too much because that's probably going to be in the next book. It's definitely, Barry's done a lot of work in this, by Fitzgerald. So he's my colleague, of course. And there's just so many ways. The chanting process and the fasting process, and it's generated with frequencies sometimes. There's the practice of fasting and omming, the generating of frequencies in given locations, usually specifically designed to encourage the certain individuals at the center of a resonant chamber to be able to disjoint themselves, in a sense of speaking, from the physical sense, and have, go through the veil and be able to communicate and those sort of things. Other people will refer to them as the machine elves, and there are so many but do you know what? It's all one of the same, and there are multiple ways. It's like divination. If you want to obtain information, crystal ball reading or palmistry, through the palm, there's tarots, but they're all getting to the same source, but there are different methods of getting there. And this is exactly the same thing around the world in different cultures. And these people that practiced it are referred to as many different things, but mostly shamans or, the spirit doctors and those sort of things. But it's exactly the same process of thinning the veil and gaining information. Now, that's not only that allows them to build up a relationship with sometimes intelligences on the other side, which is no different than sitting at a seance table and building up a relationship with communications with something. Exactly the same process. That they gain knowledge, or they could be utilized for healing purposes. And that's why they built resonant chambers at 110 on certain frequencies, especially in Ireland, the hertz, 110 hertz, because, we realize that physical wounds heal 10 times faster under that frequency. Someone knew what they were doing. It's like a doctor's surgery, I guess. If you're injured, this is your hospital. You generate the arm in there from, 110 hertz in a resonant chamber built for that. And the resonant frequency oscillates so much that it causes the wounds to heal 10 times faster. Oh, they were clever, our ancient ancestors. Of course, we've kind of lost our way a little, unfortunately, but a lot of it is now going back to realizing what was going on in the old days to try and figure out how we go forward in current days, so we are learning, but yeah, and it's age old. This communication with the deities, with the gods, obtaining information, knowledge, it's age old. And there are many different ways and different cultures all around the world. In Australia, the Aborigines had their own method. There's so many different ways. But I do believe they're all heading to the same source and interacting in certain ways. And it's interesting because sometimes when they've been given guidance by intelligences on the other side through these shamanic practices, sometimes when they decide to do this again, the intelligences recognize and will refer to them and said, look, we told you last time, and it's like, oh, so they seemingly are intelligent enough to recognize you and go, okay, you're here again, and we told you this last time, and can continue that. So you've got bridging between these experiences that gives it realism, as opposed from it's just a single event and it's different every single time. Oh, no. There's a pattern to these, and they recognize and actually build relationships with many shamanic practices around the world. Age old.
Are there any particular cultures that have more experience than others with these traditions?
That's a really, really good question, because if I was asked that maybe about 20 years ago, I'd say, one of the leading ones was the Native Americans, because their spiritual belief, or you could say in their form of religion, in a sense of speaking, is probably the most spiritual of all religions. But it correlates with other religions around the world. But now I'd probably say, well, do you know what? There's a lot in India. I mean, people don't realize that India has over 3 million gods, and that's how much variation there has been over thousands upon thousands of years, as opposed from like Christianity, where we say, oh, well, we've got one God, but it was never one God. It was, the referencing was Elohim, and it means deity, but the extra bit on the end means more than one. So it's the gods, and that's how that came about. It says the gods in the heavens, so that sort of thing was the original writing. So depending on different religions, they have their own way. But I would say, Native American has been the most spiritual, I would say. But then, if you go to sort of South America and things, they're very prominent there, but they tend to be more induced through, ingestion or inhalation of certain things. And when they asked, because it's absolutely impossible, for instance, ayahuasca, DMT, how would you even know what DMT is? And it's a very scientific term. I'm not even going to say the word, what DMT means, because it's such a...
Dimethyltryptamide, right?
That's the one, dimethyltryptamine. But how would they have known that? Years. I mean, how long have they been doing ayahuasca? Well, that goes back a long time. So how would they have known? And these plants, it's not like a nettle and a dock leaf. Because I don't know if you know, but when throughout Europe, we have nettles and they sting you when you touch your hands or arms. But next to the nettle grows another plant, and it's always found near nettles, called the dock leaf. And if you rub the dock leaf on the nettle sting, it resolves the problem. It's like, this is the problem if you touch this. And they grow together in the same place. But ayahuasca is a combination of two plants. These plants don't grow together. They're on the other side of the forest. And you would never know, I've got to mix this with this plant to line your stomach so that the DMT works. Otherwise, your stomach would counter it and go, oh, no way. I'm going to create certain amino acids in the stomach to kill it so that you won't have that effect. But you have to take this other plant to stop the stomach, our natural mechanism inside, and stop it doing what it wants to do to allow the DMT to go through and work. How do they know that? These plants don't grow together. And they said, the plants told us. Now, if you go, that's South America. Now, if you talk about North America, when you talk to the Native Americans, they will say that they can communicate with trees and things, and they've had relationships with, being able to go and over the years sit down next to this tree and they build a relationship with the nature spirits around them and stuff. This, it's really interesting because you might have South America and North America and people see a massive divide there. Mm-hmm. But really, these two sources are kind of intrinsically doing the same thing. It's like communication or listening or doing something, some type of communication with the plants to be able to obtain information from them. Because that's how they apparently found ayahuasca. There's not a chance in a million they would have found that, by mixing them two together, and have to be done in a certain way, that is, because not too much, not too less. And how did he know those specifics? Because it's just chemist. You'd have to be a chemist, really. But apparently we're told by, if you do this and if you do that, then, and apparently that's where it comes from. This is what they tell us. So it's absolutely fascinating, but it's seemingly the same process, be it North America or South America.
What about the Irish or the Celts?
Well, of course, they have their own method, but they're utilizing key locations a lot. These ancient sites were utilized. And these ancient sites have been there and they are incredible and they're older than the pyramids. But the source of a lot of the stuff in Ireland, these ancient sites, is kind of coming from the Middle East. And my friend, my colleague Barry Fitzgerald's done extensive work on this. It goes back a long, long time to Sumeria, prior to the Babylon age. And these chambers that they've got, resonant chambers, which are aligned to the summer solstice or the equinox. Now, some people will say, oh, well, it's because it's symbolism. It's about symbolism, birth of seedings of plants. It's like, it's down to, it indicates the timing to plant and stuff. Absolute rubbish. What, you don't think that we knew when to plant? If we didn't tell you, of course we know. We can tell by the seasons alone, can't we? We don't need to. You think these guys didn't know? Do you know how connected they were to the land? It's not. It's nothing to do with that. These particular locations, what happens is, what they were utilizing these places for is to be able to thin the veil. And they build certain chambers, resonant chambers, many of them, and they're aligned to the summer solstice or the equinox. Now, on those particular two specific dates in a year, I say it twice, doesn't happen very often, the sunlight passes in through the central chamber. And it happens at either sunset or sunrise. Now, what's interesting is that what is happening at sunset and sunrise that is not happening at any other time during the day? Well, the frequencies, the sunset and sunrise. This is why people like to meditate during sunset and sunrise, because as well as I do, it's got this feeling, it's something about sunset and sunrise, isn't there, that we're attracted to. What it is it's terahertz frequency. That's what's coming from. Because as the sun lifts or rises, we lose, we get less terahertz, and because we've got a suppression from the infrared and it's low to the horizon. It's like, because it's looking through Earth's atmosphere, so many layers of it when it's low. It's like when people say, the moon's always bigger at the horizon because it's magnified, because that's because there's all these layers, you see. Mm-hmm. And terahertz frequency is most prominent during sunset and sunrise. That enters into the chamber and it goes into the chamber, and there's a central location in those chambers. It's like you walk in and then there's this rounded area. The sunlight comes through. In the rounded areas, you'll see these alcoves. And these alcoves are small enough just to fit people in, that's all. And the people that sat in those alcoves were people that generated the Om. So they were generating a frequency, probably around about the frequency it's designed for the resonant chamber, because the resonant chamber is usually designed to a certain frequency. But they're not in the central location because they don't want to interfere with the process. They got to be out of the side of that. So they're producing a frequency. The sunlight is producing a frequency, a terahertz frequency coming in. So we end up with two different frequencies oscillating in a resonant chamber, and it's what is referred to as a double lock system. That double lock system is very interesting because what we found is that when you bring people in, and you imagine this in ancient times, of course, you bring in these people in, they're sitting in that central location on that day, the sunlight comes through, it hits them. There's the terahertz frequency. The OM is being generated around them and amplified because of the resonant chamber. There's your second frequency, the double lock system. And somehow they are projected. We don't know if it's literally, I would say certainly spiritually or psychically, out of their bodies, and they're somewhere else, and they're conversing with deities, entities, whatever. The veil's thin there. How do we know the veil's thin there? Well, during research, which has been carried out by my colleague, Barry Fitzgerald, under those conditions, and you have to say it takes a long time because it's only 2 times a year it happens, but you got to be right there and you got to have the right equipment and stuff. When he's in those locations, we have specialized recording devices, and he's been utilizing these things, and he's heard on the recording devices the shifting of rocks. Well, there's no big rocks moving in there. And not only that, but drumbeat. But it's not coming from our side. It's coming from elsewhere. You know? And I've been I was taken to a location by Barry, which is an ancient location up in Ireland on the top of a mountain. Had to be there at sunset because there's timing and sunlight and everything's always very important. And there were voices, you know, he said the voices come out from this wall, you know, down, it's underground, but they come out of this wall. The voices seemingly are just behind this wall, which is interesting because it's very strange. We don't know the language. It's ancient. It's an ancient language, but it is these key locations, and some of them are still very active. I've been taken to them, and I've seen them, and I've experienced the stuff, you know, heard stuff. So I have no idea, but some of them are still potently active. Some of them aren't because there's significant changes happened over the years, you know, but some of them still are. So these are our ancient ancestors knew of key locations where it's easier to interact because of the thinning of the veil. That thinning of the veil now, in a scientific way, we might say, okay, well, the thinning of the veil is in key areas of 250 nanotesla and above positive magnetics, which is quite anomalous. And geologically, there's something about the land. It's always been associated to the phenomena, anomalistic phenomena. You might, you know, in modern times, you might say, oh, there's UFOs seen around here. You go back further, oh, it was all paranormal phenomena. You go back further, oh, yeah, and it's all the gentries, and oh, it was the Fae. It was this. And if you see through hundreds of years that there's a definite connection with the land. Because I've said before, I'm not sure that, you know, there's a very strong geological connection to all this, which we are trying to figure out, but there's definite evidence there. And what's really good is that our ancient ancestors knew this. You know, they're incredible. I mean, we can dig up bones and we can say, oh, well, they were 5'8", and this is how long they lived. They lived to the 30s or whatever. This is what they ate. This is where they lived. Can we tell them anything about the spiritualism of these people, the consciousness capabilities of these? No, can't get that out of a bone. So what we do know, though, when we look at the evidence, is that they were super attuned. They knew where to go, where to construct certain things, and what to do there. You know, now I'm not saying that it might not just to be knowledge that they've gained from somehow, somewhere, but seemingly all over the world, they knew these key locations, of being able to go to locations and communicate with thinning the veil, you know, and sometimes it was guarded secrets between the hierarchy. You know, it could be the highest priests or the pharaohs. And sometimes they were given ingestible accelerants, like monatomic powder, for an example, you know, to assist with being able to transition, to communicate with the gods or the deities or the underworld or whatever that they want to refer to. But it's the same thing, but just different names. So, yeah, these places are still, you know, some of them are still very active. I've been to them. Some of them aren't. You know, a lot of them got destroyed by their own civilization, actually. They actually did destroy some of them themselves. Maybe, I don't know if maybe they had an experience they didn't like or something, I don't know. But seemingly, quite a lot of them were destroyed themselves by their own civilization. But some did remain, and some of those, some of them are still very active, yeah.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about shamanism and the traditions of shamanism. What about communication with NHI through animals or animal spirits, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah.
What about that as kind of an option or alternative?
It's quite well documented. I mean, probably one of the most common researchers now who writes books on this is Maka Hanks. He's wrote books on the connections between the owl phenomena and the NHI and UAP. But it goes back a long time. I mean, in Greek days, suddenly the sighting of an owl or an owl being decides to join your presence will be considered a very symbolistic thing, because owls not only represent knowledge and wisdom, but was also indicators to say that of great power or spiritual assistance, those sort of things. So in each and every culture has its own sorts of, animal representation. I mean, in North America and Native Americans, they have the process of being able to communicate with the nature spirits and being able to go into some type of trance-like process, usually through fastation or meditation or inhalation of certain things, to be able to connect and intertwine with that nature spirit and being able to sense things through them, such as through the sight of an eagle, for an example, or a hawk or something like that. So they believed they could do that. Now, that transition is exactly the same in European witchcraft, except it was seen through the eyes of the Femir, because they called them Femirs, and they could be a cat, but they could be a crow, they could be a raven, they could be a number of different things, and they were said to be able to see through them. And that is no different than the Native American thing. It's just got a different slant on it. And it's what you have all over the world. But these particular, I mean, the owls are up at the top of the list, to be honest, in association to UFO or UAP. There has been some argument to say, are they really owls that we're seeing? Or is it a screen memory being placed in there to represent an owl when it isn't actually an owl you're actually looking at? Because we've had reports of strange-looking deer with big black eyes, or a giant bunny, believe it or not, sat in the middle of the road. It's true. Lots of different things. So can we really trust our eyes in some cases? There's that side of things. But the other side of things is that sometimes there's seemingly some type of conscious connection between these animals and the observers. And these animals, we don't know if it's us influencing or wanting or willing, this to happen, which causes causality, to happen, or there's a handshake deal going on here between phenomena, which is coexisting and interacting with animals, to have that interaction with us as well. So is it just are we dealing with the owl's consciousness? All right, there's an owl there, and it is strange. Okay, so, or there might be something very more unusual. But are we dealing with their consciousness at that time, or have they been taken over by something else to have an interaction with us? Because if ETs or NHI, or call them whatever you will, can do that with the human psyche, and they can, then why should not be able to do it with animals? Such as the wolves, I mean, wolves are in the winter, they're quite savage because they struggle, they struggle very hard. It's hardship, very much so for wolf packs. And in the dead of winter, when it's extremely cold, you wouldn't be befriended by a wild wolf. You just wouldn't. There's no befriending, right. unless you're a meal. It's as simple as that, because it's all about sizing you up and working as a pack and da-da-da-da-da. But when you hear of stories that people have been guided out of forests by a wolf, and come to their aid and been friendly, and you think to yourself, it's outer characteristic, it's not normal. And yet we have those incidents. So is there an intelligence that takes over and assists? This has been a debate that's been going on for a long time. There's lots of stories like that from thousands of years, being saved by sharks and things that just you think, no, but interestingly enough, apparently so. So there's that big debate as what consciousness are we dealing with when we're dealing with these animals? Or is it nature spirits? Some countries, in Norway, for an example, they have the small folk and nature spirits and stuff like that, and apparently can interact with us in multiple different ways, even to the point where they seemingly take over animals to interact with us, or even cause us annoyance. And then we get down into the omen process. You're like, oh, yes, these represent an omen if this happens or that happens. It's different for different reality, for different lifestyles and cultures all around the world. But there's always that argument that what consciousness are we dealing with? Because interaction does take place. It does, really does. And some of them are so profound, you think, I'm not going to take that on board as that is a normal, natural event, because there's consistency. This isn't just one-off. It's consistency. In other words, it's, you talk to these people, it's been happening for the last month. What, how many days a week? Oh, maybe 4 or 5. What, for a month? And you think, well, yeah. And you think, no, it can't be. It's not normal. And yet, there are people that have seen this and can vouch for these incidents. You think to yourself, okay, well, that is profoundly unusual. And what could be responsible for it? And sometimes it could be a conscious connection between the observers, even if they're not aware of it. Sometimes you get gifted people who might not just be aware that they are somehow part and parcel of this, interaction. And sometimes it's sort of willing it or wanting things to happen, and it comes to be. Now, in older days, you'd be referred to as some type of prophet or spiritualist, because that's what they called these people, and in more modern times, we'd say, well, it's a conscious connection that individual's having it, or it's precognition. They know the event's going to take place.
Right.
Well, if you're having a precognition about an event that's going to take place, then it has to take place, or you wouldn't have the precognitive ability to see something. It's not going to happen. So it has to happen for you to have the precognition, So therefore, it's already set in stone. So if it's already set in stone, what's the process of it? Well, it might be a glimpse of a future event that we have. And why would we get a future event when we don't seemingly know that we've got control over it? So, and this is when we start getting down to the trickster phenomenon, because sometimes, it just likes to flash its badge occasionally and just to confuse you. And you think, whoa, how does that work? Well, thank you, but wow. How does that work then? Because it always generates more questions. And the trickster backs off then and goes, oh, you left me in frustration. That's what it does. It likes to play the games. And sometimes now and again, it just gives you a prod. It says, do you know what? I think you would realize this. I think you're kind of onto us that that there's something about our reality and you can interact with it and you can't break it, but you can mold it and you can sway it in your favor if it's all down to this. This guy's on, I tell you what, let's just some this will blow his mind. Boom. And this guy's going, what the hell? It's just, and then afterwards they back off and you're like, that's so frustrating. It does this sort of stuff, it interacts in certain ways where it just kind of messes with your head. And the trickster phenomenon has been doing this for a long, long time. But there are multiple different people have different cultures that have these events, especially with animals. If they're referred to as omens or nature spirits that take over the animals, even Mother Gaia, Gaia as a spirit, that sort of thing. There are so many different things. Nobody really can put their finger on it and go, it is that. But what they can do when you look at it as a whole around the world, we can say, yes, there's definitely something, but we just don't know what it means. It's one of them. Frustrating.
Yeah, it's very frustrating.
Yeah. It's good to experiment with it, though, I'd say. If you do and have those experiences, experiment with it, because you imagine the top level and the bottom level. Okay, the top level here is its limitation. Its bottom level is its capabilities. How far up that scale can you get? And if you can find a middle ground and go, okay, this is the comfortable area, I'm just going to keep hitting for this comfortable area and see what happens. Because sometimes when you keep hitting this comfortable area, the phenomena recognizes and starts to expand this. So your comfortable area consists of more, you see. So it's a learning process. And I think we do rely on an extra source, an external source to go, oh, I know what you're doing. I'll give you a little handy. I'm going to interact with you. You know, because once that kind of happens more regularly, because we find it in our experiments, when it happens more regularly, this becomes more rigid. And when we started like getting into seances and you're dealing with, I'll go like this, spirits, because, you know, it's whatever these things are, we have to deal with that all the time to get through to the kind of poltergeist type actions, to push through to get to the NHI stuff. But when you get to the NHI stuff, it's brilliant because it's like a phone off the hook. So you don't have to go through all that rigidity of programming and getting through all that work to get to NHI. It's there again next week or the next day. It's just there. As soon as you start opening that communication channel, they're there. That's great when you get to that level. But prior to that, you got to work through it. You know, unless you're doing, you know, Enochian, Babylonian, or ancient Latin ritualistic practices, which is the fast route, not a good route.
Dangerous route too, though, right?
It's a fast and dangerous route, and they don't like it. But it works, but it's not a good method, not a safe method either.
What are the dangers of the fast route?
Well, I'll tell you what, the dangers of the fast route was initially through the experiments was we didn't, because it was so fantastical, you could say, if that's a word, mind-blowing, sleepless nights, sat there thinking, you can't sleep because you're thinking, what have I just witnessed today? It changes your life. It raises the bar to a ridiculous level where it isolates you from other researchers which haven't reached that level. It's difficult. You end up only communicating with the source who's been involved in the experiments because you just don't have to explain.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's very difficult. But dangers of that is overindulgent, you know, because it's so interesting and you want to keep doing it. Too much and you end up with a bit of hitchhiker phenomena going back home with you. It's not good. So you have to end up writing protocols in, you know, the 2 in 5 and 3 in 7. You know, it's how often do you need to do this, really? So we have to work out what's a manageable level without too much interaction, following you, tracking you back home. When we were driving home, we could hear conversation in the back of the car. There's nobody in the back of the car. That's coming back from some of these experiments. It's just crazy. And we think, oh, God, you know, right, is this always going to happen? I mean, is it safe? You know, is there no rule book on this, Sean? You know what I mean? So it's all experimental. And then we realize, okay, we need to pace ourselves because we're getting reports from people saying, I had a hell of a week. And we thought, oh, and not just one or two, you know, maybe a whole group would be simultaneously be having things done or in these experiences in their own homes simultaneously around about the same times. So, you know, we have to be a management processes to deal with that. That protocols come in to manage how much interaction you have. Because, like I say, anything too much of it, you end up, it's easy to be overindulgent because it's incredible to see. It's fascinating. It's exciting. And you really do want to do it as much as you can. But the phenomena has a crafty habit of kind of, come on, do it more and more. And as it's doing it, it's getting under your skin a little bit. So when you leave, you're not leaving on your own. You know, it's connecting with you. And you don't want too much of that. You don't want no hooks in the skin. So there's a process of management through that. That's the doubt. And you know what? And it can be bad. I mean, it can get to the point where phenomena's, you overindulge so much that phenomena's really got its hooks in you. And it starts to affect you. It starts to affect your family. And then I don't know if it's something to do. It'd be crazy to sounds crazy this, but it's like a manipulation of the reality of in your quarter. In other words, if something's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong for you. Your car will break down. Your washing machine will break. Your fridge will break down. All on the same day. The pet dog dies. You know, you're losing family members. And it's just like, oh, my God. Now, you know, Robert Bigelow's talked about this in an interview with George Knapp after doing overindulging himself in experiments on certain locations, and it tracked back home, and he wouldn't leave it. He didn't see the warning signs. Luckily, we know, but we didn't, even we didn't see all the warning signs to him initially, but he didn't, and he ignored the warning signs, so it really got its claws in. And of course, it went to town on him, his lifestyle, his family. He said he ripped right through his life, causing so much pain and upset. I think that is the negative side of things that can happen if you're not guarding and it's not regulated in a certain way. That's the downside. That's the bad side of it.
Okay. So what do you recommend with the slow way? If people start having these experiences, how do you recommend, what sorts of experiments that are safer? And
there is a process to that as well. The best way, basically, is it's about fine-tuning your circle. Not people won't realise is that anyone just says, let's put a seance together. Well, that's okay, but it's not as simple as that. There's a mechanism, there's an engine here, and it needs to be fine-tuned to be achievable in the right way. It's got to be the best result. So, okay, so you get your people you're going to have involved in the seance, and it can take 9 months, it can take a year just to build that circle right. So you're bringing them to the table, you're conducting a certain practice of science, and you're measuring the results, and they're measured. And then you change the people out, and you swap them around for somebody else, and you change and you check the results, and you do this and keep doing it. And then you think to yourself, okay, well, now we've got, this person's always good. Let's put that person aside. He's going to be for the main circle. Let's keep going. And eventually, over a long period of time, we end up with a very, very powerful, strong circle. Now, I'll tell you what's really interesting, and this is a killer for scientists, because it was a killer for me. I wanted science, science side people. Every single one of those people are A, an experiencer, or B, a believer. There are no skeptics. There are no cynics. There are no people that are even sat on the fence. The phenomena doesn't like them. It considers them a weak link, and it brings down the chain. So basically, you might have everybody else good, but if you've got one guy in the middle who's a skeptic, and even if he's not, even if he's saying he isn't, but you can't cheat the phenomena. Phenomena can see right through you and knows, it won't work. It's like an antenna with a rake in the middle. It's just, you need unity. And the phenomena doesn't want that. It wants believers. It wants people who are ready to accept, and people who are believers and experiencers. But it's frustrating because we always want to be able to bring a scientist in. Someone says, well, I don't believe in any of that. Prove it to me. Well, that's why a lot of science, it fails a lot when you bring the science guys in. Well, it's been working all week. We bring a scientist in and they don't do nothing for us. Frustrates the hell out of us. It does. But it's a phenomenon. It goes, yeah, it's not going to work this time. And it's really annoying. But what's interesting is it's a bit like belief in religion, because people won't report having a faith apparition if they don't believe in religion. You've got to believe it to experience it. In a sense, believing is seeing. Not seeing is believing. It's the other way around. You've got to believe it to experience it. Isn't that always the way in this sort of thing? It's just how a phenomenon works. The scientists hate it. They absolutely hate that. They don't like it. But it is, in that sense, this is how it works. So once you fine-tune the circle to people which are the right people, then you can elevate that circle into the seance and start achieving what you want to achieve. Now, first off, it's going to be I always go spirits, because we end up with what is referred to as, through test, it's known as a spiritual transpositional triangle. And I'll explain to your viewers about this, because it's interesting. We know through the process of interacting with these intelligences that they don't need to obtain information. They can get it directly from the source, the experimenters. When we got to a point where we could ask questions, they delivered the answers prior to the questions were given, which means they got it from the experimenters. And they get them from the experimenters, and this is when we realize the transpositional spiritual triangle. So you go and see a psychic, and there are some good ones. I admit they've got something, definitely. And the phenomena knows that, because he knows that knows how to connect with them. And A nice young girl. She's lost her uncle. She wants to know, is he okay on the other side? She goes to see a psychic. She says to the psychic, I've lost my uncle. I just want to know, is he okay? Is he here with us? Is he on the other side? Da, da, da. She said, I'll see if I can communicate. While she's saying that, the phenomena is reading the girl and I can see everything about her uncle. Everything. I know everything about, because she knows I know. Just like us getting the answers out of us before we even give the questions. Then the psychic says, oh, right, I'm tuning in. And the phenomena connects with the psychic. And then the phenomenon gets the information from the girl and relays it back to the psychic like an antenna. The psychic is psychic because she's connecting with phenomena, and she gets it and gives it to the girl. And the girl's like, oh, wow. Well, I'm the only one that knows that. So it must be real. He's on the other side, isn't he? But it's that transpositional triangle is causing an issue here, because are we really communicating with this uncle, or is it relayed information from the phenomena, can read the source, pass it to the psychic gives it to, and it ends up with this vicious triangle, the transpositional triangle. We know that does happen. So it becomes very problematic as to, are we truly dealing with the spirits of lost ones? Because there's some evidence to support that spiritual consciousness can be hijacked through other sources. And this is where it gets very tricky. I believe, yes, we can deal with the source, and there can be, the real loss, communications with relatives and stuff, but then it can be something else. And it's very difficult to know the difference. There are certain questions that you can pry out of them, and then suddenly they burst into, abusive behavior, and you think, got you, you've blown it now. I know you're not my uncle. There are little things we can do to annoy the hell out of them, which kind of causes them to, sometimes to react. But some of them are very good and just like to toe the line and go on. And this happens a lot through Ouija board contacts and stuff, because it's the easiest source. It's like the apples that float to the top of the water are always the ones that are bad, and they're the easiest to grab. And those are the ones that want the easiest to say, pick me, sort of thing. But you know what? They like to string it along because they like the interaction. So, it's problematic dealing with things like that because we just don't know. But we can say that best process is through that way, through to the spirit communication, and push the boundaries through that till you get to the kind of life phenomena, poltergeist type disturbances. And then you kind of get through to the option to be able to communicate with things not from our reality or from our realm of reality. We're not saying we want to talk with ETs or NHI. We just want to communicate with intelligences which are not within our realm of reality, that sort of thing. And that's when you can achieve an open line source, like the phone off the hook. But when you're communicating with them, there is deception in them. It's like talking to a government official, these things. I swear to God, the disinformation and information. Oh, yes, they give us information, and years later it's checked out by scientists, and they say, oh, scientists have come out today, 6 years later, and confirmed what we were told 6 years ago. So, yes, we've got some truths. But then we know sometimes we've got some red herrings in there. And it's like the normal practice, like government officials do, don't they? They want to release information. They'll give you some red herrings in there and they give you the truth. They do the same thing. It's just annoying. But it's interesting because, if you're going to ask 10 questions, maybe half of them are actually true answers. And some of them, when you get the answers, are crazy answers. And you think, oh, why did I ask that question? Because now it's going to lead to another 10. Is there a heaven? Can you get to heaven? And the answer was, shall I tell you what the answer was? And come straight out, for those that can make it. It's like, whoa, hang on a second. That leaves like another 10 questions. Then they do this, and it's so frustrating. It really is. Sometimes they'll say, we can't answer that. And we think, oh, there's got to be some juicy stuff in there, if they won't answer it. Sometimes they'll just ignore you. And you think, oh, okay, you don't like that one, Sometimes you'll get completely wrong information. And sometimes it's so obvious you kind of go, no, it's not true. And other ones you think, oh, hey, that's interesting, never heard of that before. And you do some checking. Years later, you get some confirmation from scientists somewhere, and you think, okay, that was about dimensions around us. We were told 11, 7 or 8 years back, 8 years ago. And then I think only about 4 or 5 years ago, there was some confirmation from scientists saying that they reckon that this, from their research and the work that they've done, I think it was some type of university professors, there was 11, at this time that they've discovered. And I thought, that's interesting because we were told the same thing. So, but how do you know? It's frustrating, but there are definitely some interesting elements to it, but it takes a long time. Getting the right circle and achievability, you could take a year, maybe longer. But once you really do fine tune it and you stick with it, it grows, and it becomes more a stronger conduit over a period of time, so it gets very interesting what you can achieve then.
Any final words for the audience?
Well, I mean, it's not easy to get. I know people ask me all the time, how do you get involved in these experiments and stuff? Well, we are planning some experiments ourselves, myself and Barry, through these advanced studies, which we're going to be allowing the public to be able to come along and be part of those experiments, because it's just one thing you cannot buy, and that's experience, isn't it, really? You've just got to have it, and there's nothing else like it, to be honest with you, because it does change your life when you experience these things. And it's like, whoa. And you know what? You end up sat up at night thinking about what the hell have I just witnessed, and, and questioning things and the reality of the world around us, because suddenly your mind is expanded into another area because you've never experienced that before. And you're thinking, what the hell? And I think that's good. That's something that people can do. Is they need to get more involved in experience as opposed from just reading it or taking my word for it or anybody else's word. You don't have to. You can experience it for yourselves and witness it for yourselves. But then, like I say, you're going to get some skeptics who say, well, I've never experienced anything. And you think to yourself, I wonder why. Because the phenomena doesn't want to come up to you and shake its hand with you. Because phenomena wants it to be easy. And it wants you to be a believer. And it wants you to be an experiencer, to go, okay, you're okay. But the science guys, not very often do they go up and shake their hand, because it's like, it's too much work, And I think that's what the situation, and it's very frustrating because I come from an academic background myself, and it's great, but not always. I think the skull experiment is probably one of the best ones in the world. If anybody wants to research that, there's a good documentary out. A friend of mine that made it, Tim Coleman. It's known as the Afterlife Project. So it's on YouTube, actually. You can watch the whole documentary that was done on skull. And they achieved the same process to NHI. But then they lost control of the circle. They had to close down the skull experiment because of NHI, funny enough. So, but that can happen if you don't keep control. It's all about management at the end of the day.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Steve. And it's always a pleasure. In the next episode, we're going to talk about some interesting new research you have, which I have not been exposed to yet. So I'm actually been looking forward to this one. So talk soon, okay?
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Talk soon. You take care.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and you can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of a expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's two options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site. And there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much and keep watching. I really appreciate it.